start. Okay, we're talking about the Java bean, and we talk about the getter and setter. No weird thing inside. And then next, let's talk about constructors. What is constructor? If you've been working in Java or C, you probably know in a class we can define a function like this. Public employee, like this. Okay? Even we are not defining this in here, we still have this function as a default. So this is a constructor. So constructor is a function. This function is supposed to have the same name as your class. That's a must. Okay? So constructor is a function and should have same name as class name. Second, does the constructor have a return? Well, not like the other function. We can return a void or return int. Constructor is a function that you're not going to specify the return value in here. So no return type. Okay. So we're going to talk about why this constructor does not have a return. Okay. 3. This constructor, can we change it to private or something? Let's see. Private. Seems like no problem. Okay, so constructor, we can change it to public, private, protected, all different kind of thing. Okay, any type we want to change, it's fine. 4. Maybe the next question I want everyone to think about. Is constructor a class level function or is an object level function? Anyone?
I think it's class level.
Class level. Agree with the people? Is everyone back? I see a lot of people said yes. Anyone want to take a guess? Okay.
If low parameter, maybe is the object level.
Object level. Okay. All right. Now, why do you say it's class level?
Well, because it's a way to create an object, right? So there's no object to create.
Okay, there's no object.
In order to create an object, we need to have a constructor. So it cannot be object level.
Okay, then Zhu Yuhan, why do you say is object level?
If the low parameter, maybe it will initialize when they use a new keyword.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Constructor, everyone know. How to use it is when you're trying to use this class to create an object, use the new keyword, and you're calling this function. And whatever you put in here is actually the constructor function, right? Now, I can say this. Before you answer the question, I can say, by default, if no constructor is provided manually, then there will have a default constructor. Okay, so let's say exist means if I don't have this function, if I comment it out, then I still have this function I can call. Okay, or I can write it out just like this. So yesterday we said when you call the new constructor is the fourth step to do this. Okay, if you still remember, when we call new, we're going to find a class, allocate a memory, create the object, and on the fourth step is to call the constructor to initialize the object. To initialize, okay, means you're trying to build a house. After the house is created, at the end, you're calling the constructor to initialize the internal thing of this house. For example, you want to set the table in here, you want to set the freezer in there over this here, different size of light or different kind of things inside the house. That's what the constructor do. Okay, so whoever thinks constructor is class level, you may think that constructor, when you call it, if it's an object level function, I'm supposed to call it from an object, but I'm directly using new in here. I don't have an object, which means this function must be static, must be class level. But actually, if you look at this, without the object, are you able to initialize it? Of course not. If you want to use constructor to initialize the object, you must have the object already. Okay, so the constructor, remember, is an object level function. Okay, it's an object level function. Every time when you call new, it will be called when the object is created. Okay, so it's an object level function. And 6, when you use a new, we'll call constructor once the object is created to initialize. 7, can we call, since it's an object level function, then this function is on the object. Now, after the object is created, can we still call it? The answer is no. Okay, for each object, constructor can only be called once after its creation. Okay, once the creation is finished, that's the only chance you can call the constructor to initialize it. Once it's called, then you can never call it again. It's not like another function. You can keep calling it, okay? But for constructor, you can never call it again. All right, this is like this. And next, am I able to overload a constructor? Means, can I do this? Public employee int x this.id equal to x. Is this okay? Yes. Okay. So constructor can be overloaded. Basically, you can give an empty constructor doing nothing or give a parameter. Okay. But can we do some additional logic inside here? Yes. For example, if you want to say this, if you don't give me anything, by default, id equals to -1. Okay, or by default, I can say name equals to n8, something like this. All right, so you don't have to leave it empty in the default constructor. You can do something, but by default, it's nothing. Can be overloaded. And of course, in the overloaded function, you can also do whatever the logic you want to do. Okay, but constructors like this. Now, even I have 2 different constructors in this class. For every single employee object, am I able to call both constructors? Well, actually, there's a trick, okay? But forget about the trick. Just answer the question directly, no. Okay? So for each object, you can only call the constructor once. For example, I'm right now calling the constructor with no parameters. Then there's no way you can call the other one. Or you send in an x in here, then you will call this constructor without this one. Okay. All right. Next, constructor can be overloaded, but can a constructor be overridden? Can we override a constructor? If we need to override, then we need to have a subclass. For example, public static class called MSI employee extends from employee. Okay. Now this is a static inner class, but it's a public. We can consider as an outer class. This class extends from employee. Now employee has two different constructors. Can we override it? How to override? Do this. Copy and paste. Okay. Now it will give you an issue. Why is that? Because in Java, every function is supposed to have a return. If you don't have a return, you consider as a constructor. If you are a constructor, you must be the same name as your class name. So right here, you don't have a return and you're not the same name as your class name. So it's not allowed. Now let's give a name. Let's give a return, void. Am I overriding this function? Well, like this, you don't know. But let's add the annotation override. Then this is going to tell you there's an issue saying this function is not actually overriding this. Okay, so from this point of view, now how about this? Let me remove it and change it to my own name. I'm a MSI employee. Is this override? Of course not. When you override a function, the function name cannot be changed. So basically, can be overloaded but cannot be overridden. Okay, you cannot override a constructor. Now let's do this. In the employee, I'm going to say sysout creating employee. And in the employee with the parameter, I'm going to say sysout creating employee plus the input ID X. I'm going to change it to ID. Okay. Now in the subclass, I will do the same. I will say sysout creating MSI employee. And then I will have another constructor, public MSI employee, with a parameter in ID as well. I'm going to say sysout creating MSI employee ID. Okay, so both class, both the parent and the subclass, I have a empty default constructor display the empty creating employee or creating MSI employee, and another constructor to pass the ID at the end. Now question. Okay, if I knew a MSI employee, if I run this line of code, what can I see from the console? Anyone know? If I'm newing this class, what can I see from console? Okay, if nobody want to give a try, let's run the code. You will see two lines, okay? Creating employee and creating MSI employee. But even that looks weird. I'm only calling one new. I'm only trying to create an MSI employee. Why is displaying creating employee as well? Creating employee is clearly defined in the employee constructor. Why is that? Well, it can be explained easily in this way. Let's say right now I'm having two different classes. Okay, it's an employee and a MSI employee. And we know they have the parent and sub relationship. Okay, now when you create a new MSI employee, you're going to create an object, but this object will have part of the information from the employee. So you're basically going to create an employee part, and with the additional thing of the MSI employee itself. Okay, this is the same thing we draw it in the morning. In the morning, we just use a house and my house to do the same show. Okay, so right now you're creating an MSI employee, which is the first part. The left part is the same as the employee part, and some of the additional of its own. So once this object is finished, you need to call the constructor of MSI employee to do the initialization. Okay. Now the problem is this entire object's initialization, including the initialization for both left side and the right side. Left side is actually an employee object. Does MSI employee this class know how to initialize an employee? In a subclass, we don't. Okay, because as I said in the morning, if you still remember this picture I showed you in the morning, subclass only know the party override, and the constructor, or if you want to initialize the part of your sub object, even on this house part, you still need to call the constructor on the parent class to initialize this. Okay, so to initialize the entire MSI employee, you first need to call employee's constructor to initialize the left side, and then you call your own constructor to initialize your own piece. All right, so that's why when you call the subclass constructor, you're also calling its parent class constructor at the same time. And which of the parent constructor you're going to call? Because in the parent class you have two different constructors. Which one you're going to call? By default, you're going to call the default constructor. Okay, that's why you can see it's displayed like this. Now, what if I'm sending in a parameter in here? I'm sending in 1. This time, do I still going to display 2 lines? Yes, you're still going to display 2 different lines. Which 2 lines will be displayed? Anyone want to take a guess?
I think we'll show the creating employee and creating MSI employee plus ID.
Yes. Okay. You're still going to call the default constructor from the parent class with your own constructor, which requires a parameter. Okay. You're still calling the default one. So let's say this. When new is calling constructor, it will call its parent constructor, parent default constructor by default. Okay. Now, is there a way I can ask him to call the other parent constructor with the parameter ID inside? So if you want to do that, then in the sub constructor in this one, in the very first line, you want to do this, super this. And actually, this line, this super line, is in here, no matter you put it in here or not, okay? Even you're not writing this line out, this line is still in here. So I can say super is by default as the first line of each constructor, okay? When you create a constructor, by default, the first line is always super. What's that mean? It means before you call this constructor, you will actually call the super constructor. What means super? Previously, we learned a keyword called this. Okay, I hope you still remember. This means the current object where this function is coming from. Now, super means what? A lot of people may think super means the super class, but actually, no. Okay, super doesn't mean super class. Super means the super part of your object. What is the super part of your object? So if you see this picture, this is my entire my house object. Okay, it contains the house and the tree. Now in this object, if you're calling super, super means is super part means this piece only. The house part only super. Okay, what means this? This means the entire object, the entire my house object, the entire sub object is this. Super means inside this big object, the super part. Okay, if you can see my cursor is moving, super part. So super also represents object level. And when you use the word super, you can actually represent super dot something to represent whatever in that part. Or if you directly say super with the parentheses, means you're trying to invoke the super class constructor, means the constructor on your super part, which by default is this one. Okay. Now, however, if you pass in a parameter, for example, the ID you send into the MSI employee, then in this way means I don't want to invoke the default constructor anymore. I want to invoke the other one. Okay, so once you put the ID in here, and if you rerun the code, you will be able to see both creating with an ID at the end. Okay, you're not going to invoke the default constructor. Now, as I mentioned, super is always in the first line of each constructor. Can I put it in a second line like this? Can I put this line in front? Like this. Will this work? No. Because as long as your first line is not super, then by default, there will have a super in here. Okay, so by default, once you calling this constructor MSA employee, it will actually calling the constructor of its parent part to initialize its parent part. Since the constructor is already called, are you able to recall the constructor again? You cannot, because we said for every object, the constructor can only be called once. Okay, so in your own object, this super already initialized the parent part for you, then you can no longer call the super again. Okay, so either you call it at the very beginning in the first line, or you don't call it and then it will be called by default automatically. Okay, but anyway, super cannot be super to call the constructor must be the first line. Okay, now this is basically the constructor. When you call the subconstructor, you will call it parent constructor. Now the question is, as a super is the very first line of each constructor, is super also the first line of the employee constructor? For example, in here, do we have super in here? Actually, yes. Okay. Then when you call the employee's constructor, what will this line do? What is employee super? Does employee also have a super class?
Is the object class?
Yes. Okay. In Java, we have a class called object. This class is defined in a package called java.lang.object. object. Okay, so this is basically the top level class in Java, the very top level class in Java. Okay, so every class in Java is a subclass of this class, except this class itself. Okay, every other class in Java beside this class extends from this class. For example, employee, since you didn't mention the parent class of this class, so by default is extending from object. Okay, no matter you write this or not, it is the fact. But for example, this class, MSA employee class, I specifically mentioned this class can extend from employee. Is this class still extend from object? The answer is not directly extends from the object, but since it extend from employee and employee extend from object, so this class is also extend from the object. Okay, but it's not directly extend from the object. Now the question is, can we have a class in Java to extend from two different classes? Or in another way, is Java support multi-extend? Means one class.
No.
No. Right. It's no. Okay. Why is that? Now, during the interview, people may ask you to do this. Please explain to me what is Java diamond issue. Okay. These two are actually the same question. What is diamond issue? It's like this. So people is saying if Java is allowed multi-extension, then maybe I can draw a shape like this, like a diamond shape. Okay, so I have class A, B, C, and D. Now, if inside A I have a function called foo, foo will do whatever, and in the B I'm gonna override the foo function, and I will say system.out.println B. Okay. Now, if I do the same inside C, C can say I will display C. Now the question is, if Java allow multi-extend, then I can have a class called D to extend from both B and C. And since both functions are not abstract, I don't have to override them. So if I'm writing code like this, D equals new D, and I'm calling D.foo, the question is, which foo function will be executed? What will be displayed on the screen? B or C? Java doesn't know the answer. So Java is saying, do not put me in this dilemma. So Java does not allow multi-extending from the class. Okay, and we call this diamond issue. They're saying this shape looks like a diamond. So Java diamond issue represents Java cannot have multi-extend. Now, can one Java class implement multi-interfaces? Is diamond issue exist in the interface?
No, you can extend multiple interface.
But what if all these interfaces have the same function defined?
They don't have implementation, so you can implement it.
Exactly. Okay. So if all these are interfaces, then they don't have implementation. They don't have body in here. So no matter which function you extend, you have to implement it, give the body. Okay. So one Java class can implement multi-interfaces, but can only extend from one class at most. Okay. Remember this. I'm gonna write it in the inheritance test. Okay, now another question. Something I forgot to mention in the morning. So can interface implement another interface?
Yes.
The answer is no. Okay, look at the word implement. Implement means give the body. Can one interface implement another interface? Means can one interface provide a body for the other interface? Of course not. Okay, so interface cannot implement an interface, but can interface extend from another interface? This time the answer is yes. Okay, interface, they can extend each other. Means I will get your function. I know your function is defining your interface is also abstract, but I'm gonna get it. Okay, I can define it in my interface as well, but I'm just not trying to implement it. That's fine. Okay, so I can say interface can extend from other interfaces, but cannot implement any. Okay, now we also say class can implement interface. Can interface implement a class? Of course not. Interface cannot implement anything, right? Can interface extend from class? Also no. All right, so basically in Java, between classes you can extend. Between interfaces you can extend. But between interface and class, only class can implement an interface. Okay. All right. What I'm trying to talk about in here is not actually this. What I'm originally trying to talk about is the object class. So basically, since we talk about the object class, we talk about this. So in Java, there is a top-level class called object. Since in Java, every class can only extend from one superclass at most. So if you look at our employee class right here, this MSI employee already extends from employee, so it's not gonna extend from object anymore. But since the employee is extending from the object, so MSI employee also have those functions from the object. Okay, so object is basically a top-level class, and remember, it's a concrete class. Let me actually show you the object class. You can click into the object class. This is object class. Okay, so this class located in a Java long package. All right, there's some functions. They are all very important. We have to know them all. So since a class, for example, this employee class, since a class is always a subclass of object, if object has any function, will this employee or will any of the other class also have those functions? Of course, the answer is yes, as long as they're object level. Okay, now object is a class. Let me show the functions in this class. It has function like clone, equal, finalize, get class, hash code, notify, all register natives to string with all this. Okay, this function called register native, this function right here is a static function. All the other functions, they are object level functions. Okay, now we haven't talked about all these functions right now, but I just want to mention one for now. For example, toString. Okay, so toString is a function. It's a public function. There's no other restriction, just called public string. It's toString. It's gonna return a string, and this is the logic of the toString. So, question: does the employee class currently have toString function inside?
Yes.
Yes.
Does the MSI employee has toString inside?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So toString function is just a normal non-static object level function. So every class is supposed to have it. Okay. So what's the usage of toString? Have you ever used toString before, anyone?
override the toString method to implement the way you want to.
I know, but I mean, did you ever call this function before?
Yes.
So when you do the sysln, it will call the toString method, right?
Are you doing this? For example, let's say this. Employee e equal to this. Are you going to do this? Sysout e dot toString.
You can just put e and it will automatically call the toString method, I think.
Yes. Okay. Barely people are calling this toString by itself. Most likely you're going to directly put e. Let's see what happens when you put an object inside. When you go to this print line function, you can see the object you're calling in here, send it to here. It's basically generate a string by calling the value of, and this s will be printed. So how this value of function do? So you go to the value of, you can see it's basically doing a null check to see if your object is null. If it's null, directly return null. Otherwise, calling the toString and return the toString. Okay, so by default, when you actually calling the print line of an object, it will display the toString, unless it's null. Okay, now what will be displayed if I run this code right now? Let's take a look. It will display something like this. Come the Mercury.bin the employee $, my MSI employee at this place. Here's an at. Okay. Why is displaying this format? Because it's actually trying to display the toString function on this employee class, but I didn't override it. On this MSI employee class, but I didn't override the toString in anywhere. So by default, it's trying to display the toString defined in the object. Now let's take a look at the object. The object is saying I'm going to display get class .get name. Now what is get class? Get class is another function defined in the object class right here. Okay, so this will return you the information of this class. And when you call the get name, it's basically return you the class name. So right now, I'm calling this function from a my MSI MSI employee class. So this get class.get name will return me this to tell me what class is this object type. Okay, and after that, display at. Here's an at. At the end, you're going to display integer.toHex string. What's mean to hex string? What's mean hex? This I really don't know how to say it in English. 16进制. Okay, it means the 16. For example, you can represent a number in binary. That means you only use 0, 1, 0, 1 to represent. You can represent a number in oct way, means you only use 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to represent. And a normal decimal number, you use 0 to 9 to represent. Okay, but hex means to 16, means you're going to use 0 to 9 plus A, B, C, D, E, F. A, B, C, D, E to F to represent. There an F? 0 F? No, there should be E only. Okay.
There's, I think.
There is, because 9 plus another 6 letters.
So basically, you're going to use 0 to F to represent this number. Okay. Now, what number are you going to represent is the hash code. So what is hash code? Hash code is also another function defined in the object. Okay. Now, this function by default return an int. What will be returned? By default is the memory address of this object. So as you still remember, we said in the JVM, the memory address is an int number. So it's going to return you an int and convert it to the hex format and display. Okay, so what does this line mean? This line is basically telling me at this location, I have a MSI employee object. Okay, that's why employee at this location. So this is the default toString function. Okay, so every class in Java, including the POJO bin we're trying to talk about in here. POJO bin, we said we don't want to put any logic, but there's no way you can avoid those functions from the object class. Okay, so in a typical POJO bin, we can have our private fields, we can have our constructors. We should not have a main function in here. Okay, I should not have a main function. And you could have your getter setters, and also you could have your functions that extends from the object class, for example, toString or hashcode, all those functions. Okay, so these are some key point about the constructor and about the some of the function in the object. I haven't talked about it in detail. Okay, now here's a tricky question. Something like this. So this is what the tricky part of the OOP. Okay, give me an example. Let's say in the employee, I have, or let's say this. I'm gonna give you a try in the polytest. So I have house and my house, and let me create a constructor of house. Actually, you don't have to type, okay? For getter setter constructors, you don't have to type. In IntelliJ, you can do this. Right click in here, there's a generate. And you should remember the shortcut. In Windows, it's Alt Insert, okay? Alt Insert. You're gonna ask you what are you gonna generate. You can choose, I'm gonna generate the constructor. Okay, so he will generate a constructor for you. Well, I think there's a problem with this. Hold on 1 second. Okay, all right, never mind. So I don't have field in here. So I'm gonna generate constructor, and I'm also gonna generate constructor for my house. Okay, now the question is, still remember this win function? We override it, right? So in the constructor, since constructor is an object level function and it's the last step of creating the object, means when you call the constructor, the object is already in place, available to use. Now, can I call win function? Can I call win function in here? Yes, I can. But the problem is, if I'm creating my house or this, which win function will be called? Since I'm calling new my house, so everybody know at the first line of here, I'm actually calling super. So this will invoke the parent constructor. It will call this constructor. Now this constructor will also call the win function. Now the question is, which win function will be called? This function apparently going to be called twice. Okay, let me comment out all these. Just leave one line on the top. Which win function gonna be called? Anyone take a guess?
Yeah, I guess we go for my house 2 times.
We're going to call my house win twice.
Yes.
Right. You are right. Okay, you're right. You're going to call sub win twice. Now, what if I change this to private? Now you cannot override anymore. Okay, I haven't talked about the private, but private function cannot be overridden. So what is going to happen this time?
So this time I think, can I make a guess?
Sure.
So I think it's the same.
It's the same. Gonna call subwin twice.
Yes.
This is a diamond issue. Okay. So let's see what happens this time. So what happened is in a parent class, you have a private win function. Okay. And in a subclass, since you cannot see the private function from the parent, so you cannot override it. But accidentally, coincidentally, I defined my own win function by myself. Okay. Now, when you create the entire sub-object, you're going to call super, which is the super part, to initialize this super piece. Okay. Now you're calling the constructor defined in here. This constructor is responsible for initializing this left side. If you draw the picture, actually, since the win function is object level, so when you override, this win function right now looks more like supposed to be put on the right side in here. Okay, when you define this win function, you're supposed to put the win on this side, just like the tree function we defined in the morning. Why is that? Because from a subclass perspective, you don't know there's a win function in the parent. Okay, you're thinking you're defining a win function by yourself, just like the tree we have in the morning. Okay, it's your own function. You should not put in the parent part, because in your mind, parent doesn't have a win function. Now you're calling the parent constructor. This parent constructor is the super part of the constructor, which means if I'm drawing a picture, I can say from here to here to see everything is the keyword of this. From here to here to see only this piece, that's super. Okay, now super can only see this piece, and you're calling super constructor, which your win function is actually in this side. Okay, so you have a hidden win function in here, but it's a private function. Your entire sub-object doesn't know there's a private win function. However, when you call the super constructor, you're trying to call the win function which can only be seen by the super part is this piece. Which win function will be called? Since the super part can only see this piece, so the only win function he can call is this private win. Okay, everyone? You can try this by yourself. Okay, later on you can, after we talk about the public private, you can change all these to practice. This is why every day after the class you're supposed to spend some time to practice all this. Okay, change everything and just play around. Okay, so this is one tricky question. I'm just trying to give you an example. Okay, there's a lot of these kind of questions everywhere. For example, if you change this to private, what happens? Sorry, if you change this to private as well, what happens? Okay, if you change anything to be protected, what happens? If you have a field in here called int x and you have a field int x in here, what happens? All those different behavior, please everyone play around with it by yourself. Okay, but anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is there's a lot of tricky thing in here. And during the interview, if most people will not ask you this kind of tricky question, but there's one type of place they like to ask you is before you actually go for the face-to-face interview, they will give you like a screenshot or ask you to do these kind of quiz questions online. In those online questions, there may have a lot of these kind of questions. Okay, so this is the thing, the constructor, and also the Java Bean. Okay, so what do we normally have in the Java Bean? We should have the private fields, constructors, getters, setters, and normally we will have a toString function. So let's override the toString function. We can choose to generate toString. And let's say we can actually override toString function by ourselves. Override public string toString. And we know by default, if you're not overriding it, it will display where is this object located. But is that what we need? Is that toString function a good toString function to display where this object is located? It's not. Okay, it's not a good toString function. Why? Because nobody cares about where is your object located. Do I need to know your object address? I don't. Okay, so what do we actually need? When I send in this E for display, what actually do I need? Actually, you need to see all the fields in this object. What's the value of this object? That's the actual data I'm actually cared. So you're supposed to have a toString to return you a string, include, for example, include your ID, name, and done all these informations. Okay, you can put, let's say this, ID plus ID plus comma name, and you put name, done, whatever at the end. Okay, follow everything. But normally we don't have to generate this toString by ourselves. We can just also generate the toString. He will ask you which field you want to take into the consideration. I say all of them. So here, this is a toString. Okay, once you have the toString overrated, you can rerun the code and see. This time the code will display the information you need. It's no longer going to display the address. It will display ID, name, done, everything. Okay, so this is a very typical Java Bean. I believe if you have work experience before, you must already seen some Java Beans before. Okay. Now, why do we need to learn Java Bean? Because next topic we're going to talk about in here is we're trying to talk about immutable, but before that, let's talk about the accessibility, because we're going to use this a lot and this is keep bugging us. So what is accessibility? Well, this is one topic I really don't like, I hate, okay, because there's no logic in between. There's only test and remember. Okay, so what I'm going to do is write some test case, and hopefully everyone can remember these features. So in the OP package, I'm going to create a class called access parent, access part. And in the same package, I'm going to create another Java class called access sub1. And outside of the OP, inside the basic, I'm going to create another class called access sub2. Okay, So basically, I have 3 classes, which 2 of them are in the same package, but the other one is in a different package. So first, I'm coming to the parent class. In the parent class, I'm going to define 8 functions. Public static void function 1. And I'm going to copy paste this force, and I'm going to define a F5 to remove the static, copy paste 3 more times. Okay, so basically I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So why am I creating all these 8 functions? Because I want to modify this public. This is what we call the accessibility. So we have public protected, or nothing in front, or private. I'm also going to do the same in here. Public protected, nothing, and private. Okay, now let's talk about what are these. So I believe you learned this in school, but we still need to mention this a little bit. So these 4 functions on the top, they are static functions. We already said the static function are class level. You can directly call. You don't have to create an object. And also, the static function cannot be overridden. So let's try to see where can I call these 4 functions. Okay, now let's go to the sub1 first in the same package. In the sub1, I'm going to create a main function. And inside the main, am I able to call function 1, 2, 3, 4 in here? Just like access parent dot function 1, 2, 3, 4. Am I able to do that? Well, it's stuck. Oh no, computer crash. Okay, I'm gonna have something really bad happens. Okay, my computer is really stuck in here. Okay, am I able to call these 4 functions? Let's see, there's anything stuck in my computer. Well, you can see F4, you cannot call it. Okay, since F4 is a private function. So let's write down some conclusion. Conclusion is to call a function before I conclude, let's write only one conclusion in here. Private function can only be called within same class. Why am I saying this? Because inside here I can call F4. Okay, in the same class you call it is okay. But once I jump out of the same class, I'm going to another class in here, I can no longer call F4 again. Okay, but actually, if you want to know more precisely, this line is also not very precisely. Within the same outer class, this is very, also you need to understand it, okay? Which means if I have a class, for example, public static class, let's say X class in here, okay? I have a function, void full. In here, can I call F4? Yes, you can call. Okay, probably in your mind, the private function belongs to the class, and you cannot call F4 within another class, but actually you can. Okay, in the inner class you can. Okay, you can try this. If you have more layers of inner class and inner class inside inner class, can you still call it? You can try it, play around with it. Okay, but anyway, I'm not going to talk about that too much in here. I just simply say you cannot call it, you can only call it within the same class. Okay. Now, for the other functions, let's see, am I able to call them in the access sub 2? So same thing here, I'm going to create a main function, and I will copy paste these lines into the sub 2 and see what happens. You can see, of course, the function 4 cannot be called, but 2 and 3 also cannot be called at the same time. But F1 is totally fine. So let's give the conclusion. Public function can be called from anywhere. Means no matter in the same package or different package is fine. And protected function can be called from same package. Also, if there's nothing in front, okay, nothing in front, what do we call it? A lot of you guys like to call it default. Originally, I also call it default too, but right now I don't call it default because in Java there's a keyword called default. I don't want to mix it. So I'm in here calling it package level. Okay, package function can only be called from same package. Now, does that mean the protected and the package are the same? Actually, no. Okay, actually, no. Let's try it again. So this time, I'm going to add extend in here. Access sub 1 extends from access parent. And the same thing, I'm adding it into the access sub 2. Once I add it, I'm going to release the F2 and 3 again. Look at this time. F2 is okay to call. Only F3 is unavailable still. Okay, if I remove the extend, you can see F2 will also give issue. Once I add the extend, F2 is good. So the conclusion is F2, a protected function, can be called from the same package or subclasses. Okay, protected basically means within the same package or as long as we are in the same family, then you can call me. Okay, so this is the protected function and the package level function. Now, the next one. The top is talking about to call a function. Now, what about to override or override a function? Can we override all these? These are non-static function. We said static function cannot be overridden. Now, these are non-static. Can I override it? If we're talking about override, then we have to have parent and child relationship. Now, our sub 1 and sub 2 already extend the parent, so let's see, can I override it? How to override? I can just simply copy these functions from parent to these classes. Okay, I copy paste them in here. Am I overriding all of them? Maybe, maybe not. How to verify if it's overriding? I can add annotation, override on top. Okay, now can I add this annotation in front? Yes, it's the same. Okay, no matter in front or on top, it's actually in front. Okay, so it's the same, but most people in Java prefer to put it on the top. Now you can see the last one, the private function, is giving you an issue. Okay, means the last one cannot be overridden. So remember, to override a function, private function cannot be overridden. Now the others can be overridden, but from where? Let's try. If I copy these three functions all the way to sub 2, will that still work? You can see the same thing happens. the protected function is still able to be overridden, but then the package level you cannot. So the conclusion is public function can be overridden from anywhere. Package function can only be overridden from same package, and the protected I believe a lot of you guys may think I'm gonna write this can be overridden from same package or subclasses. Okay, but I'm not. I'm gonna write this from anywhere. Look at this. The protected function can be called within the same package or outside of the package. Can be overridden from the same package or outside from the same package. Does that mean I can override a protected function from anywhere? Yes, it's still the same from the same package or subclass. But right now we're talking about override. Okay? When we talk about override, then it's always in a subclass. All right? Since we're talking about override, so there's always we're talking about in the subclass. Because if there's no subclass, then there's no override. Override happens only in the parent class and subclass. So there must be subclass. If it's already subclass, then I don't have to write from same package or subclass, because as long as you're doing override, it is a subclass. You can do it anywhere. Okay, so basically, to override a function, protected and public can be overridden from anywhere. But package level, since you can only see within the same package, so you can only override it from the same package. But private function cannot be overridden. Now, private function cannot be overridden. What about in an inner class like this? Let's say public static class X. Can I override F8? Let's say extend from X's parent. Am I able to override void F8? Still you cannot. Okay, even you can see, we already proved that within the same outer class we can see that, but you can still not override. Why is that? Because Java says as long as there's a private function, you cannot override it. Okay, so basically these are the different of all these. Okay, so the majority different you should take into consideration is the protected and package. All right, once we finished this, the next thing I want to talk about is actually the immutable, but this is a little bit big topic. We don't have too much time today, so I'm not going to talk about this today. Let's find a small topic to talk about. Okay, let's talk about reflection. Okay, reflection is actually big, but we're not going to introduce a lot in the reflection. Instead, I'm going to give you a homework for practice. So what is reflection? Reflection basically, English means, for example, you have a mirror, okay? One thing put in front of the mirror and you can reflect it. You have a reflection inside the mirror. So reflection. What's mean reflection? So in Java, normally what we do is I have a class user, and by using this class user, I can create an object. Okay, from a class, create an object. Reflection means, what if I give you this object user, you object? Are you able to find out what this class looks like? Basically, give you an object and find out what the class looks like. Reverse engineering. Okay, that's called reflection. And if you can, then actually you can use the functions or the feature that's provided by Java to modify your own object again. Okay, so how the reflection works. So when I actually show you this, where's my thing? Anyway, when I actually show you the toString function, you can see in the object the toString is trying to display the class name at some location. And the class name is displayed in this way, getClass.getName. Now getClass, look at this function. If you go to this function, look at this. All right. Now, question. Is this function concrete or abstract? Anyone? Guess time.
I think it's concrete, but not implemented in Java.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you clearly. Say it again.
I see this method should be concrete, but it's not implemented in Java, maybe in other language.
Yes.
It is native.
Yes, exactly. Okay. This this function is a concrete function. But the problem is, if it's a concrete function, then where's the body? Normally in Java, if you don't have a body, it should be abstract. Okay. So for example, let's go to hello world. Okay, anywhere. Let's say I define a function, public void x function. If I don't give a body, then this must be an abstract function. I need to add abstract. We already talked that. But actually, you can also put another keyword called native in here. Okay, once you put it in here, you will not require to have a body. And if you run the code, will this give you any issue? As long as you're not calling this function, everything's good. For example, you run it. You're not calling this x function anywhere. Okay, you're good. Oh, cool. But let's try to call it. Let's put it static way. Okay. What if I'm trying to call this function x? What happens? You will give an exception saying unsatisfied link error. Okay, unsatisfied link error. What's mean unsatisfied link? What's mean native? Since I already gave you the homework of the class loader, I believe if you've been doing the research, you already know Java is a computer language, and itself, this Java language itself, this software itself, is not written by Java, of course. You cannot use Java to create Java, right? So Java itself is created by using C and C++. So some of the function commonly used, very frequently used. So they're saying, I'm not going to define the function body directly by using Java code. Instead, since every Java code you need to compile and then run. Compile means you convert your Java file to a low-level language. Since you always need to convert it, how about I directly implement this function by using C and put this function in the library. Okay? Next time when you call this function in the runtime, if this is a native function, means this function you have a body, but the body is just not put in here. The body is in the library. When the JVM loaded, it will be loaded. So when you call this function, it will dynamically search for this function and link it. Okay, use the dynamic link to link this function with the function body to call it. Native means this function you should be able to link it. However, this X function is defined by me. I never put an implementation of this function in the libraries. I cannot link it, so it's giving me this issue. Okay, so there's a mechanism called JNI to do this. If you're interested about it, you can read through it. Okay, but in the object, the getClass function is a native function. Means when you call it, it will automatically find the body from the library and invoke it. Okay, so what this function do? This function will basically return you an object which is a class type. Now, what is class? Is this our class? No. This class, you can see, all written in lowercase, is a Java keyword for us to use to create a class. But this class, you can see, it starts with a capital C. Capital C means this is a class name. Means there's a class called class. We can actually go inside and see there's a class, and the name of this class is class. Okay, so the getClass function will basically do the logic and return you a class type object. And from that object, what can we get? Since this getClass function is declared in the object class and it's a public function, so every object in Java has this function. For example, I can do this OC, for example, I'm using this OC object, OC.getClass. Now this will return me a class type object. I always call it class. Okay, normally if you're trying to create an object, because for example you're creating an outer class object, normally you can call it outer class, lowercase the first letter, but you cannot say this class equal to that, because class is a reserved keyword. So normally if you define a class object, you use class to represent it. So this class is a object returned by this getClass. And what function do we have in here? Dot. You can see there's a lot of functions. For example, getDeclaredField. Okay, getDeclaredFields return you a field list, or getAnnotations to show you what annotation you used within this class. Which class? Outer class, because OC is an outer class. Okay, so when you call OC.getClass, the class, this object you're getting in here, is actually the outer class object. Okay, so why am I using the word object? Is because, well, I'm not sure if I can show you something in here. If you're trying to display outer class dot class, double equal to OC dot get class in here, it will display true. Okay, so what is class? So in Java, every class, no matter outer class or hello world, in every class, you put a dot in here, you can find this field. It's like a field. Automatically, you can use dot to dot it out. And this basically is the same thing as you use any of this class object and call the getClass function. So basically, no matter you're using outerClass.class or you're using OC.getClass, you will get the same class object. Okay, is this object. And double equal in Java means you're trying to compare the address of that thing. If you're trying to try this, you can try it by yourself. Okay, but anyway, what I'm trying to say is, if I'm creating another outer class, let's say outer class OC2 equal to outer class, new outer class, and I'm saying class 2 equal to OC2.getClass. Now, class and class 2, these two are actually the same object. They're the same. Okay, no matter which object you're calling the getClass function from, as long as these two objects are from the same class, then the getClass will return you the same object. Means every class has its own class object loaded in the JVM. Okay, so basically, once you're getting this from this class object, since they're all the same, then you can call the functions to show you the information of this class. You can display the class loader. You can display all the constructors inside. You can display all the methods inside. You can display all the fields, all the enum, all the interfaces, all the modifiers, everything inside. Basically, all the functions listed here can help you to understand the entire thing of this class. Okay, and you can also use those functions inside to modify your own object. By using this, you can not only see the public information, but also you can find all the hidden private field and information. Okay, so what is reflection? This is reflection. Basically, by using the get class function, you can start to know the information of your class. And you can use this class to modify whatever you want to touch in each of your class object. Okay, so reflection is a very, very extremely powerful feature provided by Java. You can use it to do basically every modification inside Java. It's so strong. Okay, now with the reflection, like I said, by using reflection, you can actually modify the private field. Actually, you should try this, okay? To use reflection to modify a private field. You can try this over the weekend. Now, if this is so powerful like this, you can even modify your private field. Why do I still need a private? Everything I'm trying to private, I can use reflection to break it. Then is private still useful? The answer is yes. Why is that? Because when you go to work, you're not supposed to use reflection. Okay? Reflection is like a backdoor saved in Java for some special purpose to use. Normally, you don't use it. So what is the special scenario that you should use the reflection? So if someday your team, your project is to create an API or create a library which is a framework or something that can be used not only for your project, but also can be used across different platforms. Maybe you're going to create something for a company that can be used across the entire company. Everyone can use it. This time, because you don't know what your project or what your package going to be used, or what scenario your package going to be used. For example, some other team grab your product and use it in their team. But when you write the code, you don't know what they have in their system. You're just writing a general platform or framework thing for other team to use. In this way, you have to predefine something in your framework so that your code can be used directly by the team, and the team will, for example, the other team can tell you what's the field do I have in this function, in this. For example, I'm telling the framework, I have an employee class, inside I have an ID field and I have a name. Then your framework probably is able to automatically call the getter and setter because you already tell me I have a field called ID. So you will automatically search for a function called getID or setID to call. But the problem is only give you something like this. I'm telling you I have a field called ID, which is a string. Okay, I'm telling you by using a string way to tell you. Based on this string ID, how do you call the function called getID? How do you call this function with this name? Is there a way you can convert it? I can modify the string. I can find, okay, you tell me there's an ID. I will plus a get called get and modify the first letter to capital. I can have this function called getID. Now, by giving you only the string, how do you use this string to call the function with the same name? There's no way to do this in a normal way. The only way to do this is to use reflection to loop through all the function within that class and find out which function's name is the same as getID and call it. Or you don't have to loop through it. There's a function actually, you provide the getID, you will call the getID function for you. Okay, so reflection is basically very, very frequently used if you're coding a library or a framework. But if you're not, if you're just doing a normal project, 100% you're not going to use reflection. Okay, now what if you use reflection in your code? What gonna happen? Then probably you cannot submit your code like you want. You need to have your code reviewed by your teammates, by your manager, or by whatever some other people in your team. And if you're using reflection, most likely they're gonna deny your code. Okay, it's not gonna approve. So reflection is a powerful tool. I'm not going to talk detail because nothing detailed to talk about. It's only just trying to show you all those functions. So it's just a practice. You can just try to play around with all those functions. And during the interview, most of the job, since they're not doing the library work, so they're not going to ask you too much about the reflection. Okay, as long as you know what reflection is doing, then that's good enough. Okay, so this is reflection. The entrance of the reflection is this get class function. Okay, basically that's the thing I'm gonna talk today right here. And next Monday when we come back, I'm gonna talk about immutable and the other things. Okay, is there any questions so far? So quiet. All good? Anybody? Is everyone here?
Yes.
All right. Then good luck, everyone. Hopefully,
I think it's, so many information, so just need time to review it.
okay.
I don't have any questions.
Hope you're okay. It's just only 2 days, right?
Yeah.
Almost 6 weeks. So if you feel a lot, please start to review and practice. Okay. When I say practice, it means you should practice the code every day. But what is the code you're supposed to write? One thing I can think of is like when you go home, you should pretend everything I teach you during the class are wrong. Okay, for example, I told you static function cannot be overridden. Private function cannot be overridden. You should assume what I'm telling you is wrong, and then you should verify. Write some of your testing code to see if whatever I'm telling you is really correct or not. If you know how to write the verification code, then most likely you understand the scenario, you understand the situation. Okay, if you don't know how to write code to verify all these, then probably you need a little bit more time. Okay, just play around, change everything, and play around to see if there's anything different. All right, that's all for today. If no more question, then I will see you on Monday, and happy Chinese New Year, everyone. Okay?
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Hi. Our homework is. Sorry.
No worries. Who's talking?
I want to know our homework is UML.
UML is for you to better take a look. Everyone's supposed to know. And I think there's one more I gave you. I forgot what is that.
Okay.
Let's see. The reflection to modify a private field you should practice. And maybe that's it. Okay, but even there's no homework, you should practice.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.